We'll call to order the November meeting of the Planning Commission at 7:10. For the record, let's make this Commissioner-elect Watson will be sitting in for Ms. Petusky this evening. So first order of business is approval of the October 17th, 2017 minutes.
So moved.
Motion approved by Mr. Vexi. Okay. Second by Mr. Watson. Any changes, discussion, corrections? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. Item 2, zoning referrals, text amendment to Section 6 regarding LB zones. Mr. Hibansky, I believe we have a withdrawal.
We do. The applicant withdrawed this afternoon.
Okay. So withdrew. Okay, so motion to strike from the agenda, please. Mr. Vexi, is there a second? Second. Mr. Senft, any discussion?
Just to clarify, we discussed this at the last meeting?
Yes.
This is in reference to, because there was no paperwork for this.
This was the one where we had, we know that there were questions,
right,
and the applicant was not present.
And this is the one Pat had questions about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so I guess they decided not to continue with it. Okay, all in favor of the motion to strike, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. Informal referrals, no vote required. Parking policy review. Why don't you bring us back up to speed with that?
Sure.
one?
Well, per the request of the Zoning Commission, there was discussion about looking at the parking requirements for the town of Stratford. We did a comparison of some municipalities that are similar in size and demographics to the town of Stratford. We handed those out. They referred that to the Planning Commission. So I understand this is kind of a transitional time, so and it's a lot to digest looking at those parking matrices. So yeah, I think the way we left it was if anyone had any feedback, they could certainly send it to me. I would compile all the comments and put them together in a report and bring them back. I haven't received anything yet. That might mean that it was a perfect report, and I highly doubt that, but I would say that unless there's anything else, I would leave it open for more comments going forward because there's a lot in there. There's a lot to look at in the report.
Sure.
I know from studying Complete Streets and all of the other planning initiatives that are going on around the country that the idea of us being over accommodating too much parking, having too many parking spaces is generally accepted, whether it's a small town or a large town or a city. Everybody is essentially saying we have put too much parking in place. Our expectations of parking is too much. I think that's true. And looking at what you had put together, Jay, it really makes sense, even just comparing it to our neighbors, where we could make changes. The only other thing that I bring this up all the time, I should go and do some lookup of their actual. I know that like Great Barrington, I keep bringing them up, but they have done something where they have not put in more parking. What they've agreed to do is for their high parking time periods, they essentially are leasing private space during those periods of time. So they are essentially paying local churches and everybody else for use of their parking lots during periods when there is heavy retail traffic or an event or those kinds of things, which makes absolutely perfect sense because that is something we do have. We still do have civic parking spaces around here that could be better utilized without just counting on-street parking. That's my only comment. Maybe we could look into that, seeing about adding something like that into the mix.
Definitely. And what would you suggest? Would you suggest reaching out to private property owners within maybe a half mile of the downtown to see if they'd be interested in participating in a program like that?
Yeah, because I think that might help us recover some of our retail that's simply not viable because there's no parking. So if we were to find places, I know it would certainly help downtown with the church lot directly behind Acapulco sitting empty almost all the time when Acapulco's lot is filled. It's from 7 to 10 o'clock. That would be one area where you could guarantee those stores, I mean, those restaurants there, a 20% increase possibly of traffic in that area without doing anything. We would not be changing anything other than someone would have to pay the church some kind of an upkeep on their lot. But I think it could be a win-win situation.
Sure. Well, you can see that some other municipalities and some research that I've looked at, you'll have a special business district like a downtown who will come to a consensus that we want more parking downtown available, but we don't want to build and waste more space by building parking lots. And what they'll do is they will pool financial resources together and let's say, and ask the church, okay, if we give you so much money per year, would you be willing to allow public parking in the downtown in your lot during 8 a.m. to or whatever.
Weekdays or whatever, exactly. Every day but Sunday.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we should actually look into, and I think that you could get business and everybody else to be interested in that kind of a concept. It would help some of the churches. I know my assumption is, because it's like every other church, they're all stretched for money. They don't have money to even upkeep their own parking lots, which is why we have some of them considering selling that land, because it's a burden to them. That's my only comment. I know I'm loading you up with another item, but I have thought about this. I did think about what you were writing.
And separate from that, and I think just by, doing the research on the parking and kind of thinking about it for a few weeks, we're not too far off, which is, I think, good for our parking requirements. I don't think we ask for an exorbitant amount of parking spaces, but there are certain ones that I think that we could tweak. And I think that, just if you folks are kind of looking for some direction as to what to do with this next, I think it might be to, if you feel like there are some things that we could tweak and some new parking calculations like motor vehicle use. If someone has a repair shop, currently there's no parking requirement for them. They could go in with no parking spaces. So, I mean, if you gave the zoning commission maybe the discretion to say, okay, we're okay with Jay going forward and making some more formal recommendations about what uses we should now be considering and which ones that we think that are existing that we might want to reduce the parking requirement. And then it would come, as we would propose that text amendment, it would come back to the Planning Commission and, discuss the rationale for why we chose what, and then you would recommend back to the Zoning Commission prior to any adoption.
It's a good project for the new year. I think we would say, look favorably upon you handing us a new list and seeing where we could go with that.
We'll probably keep that as something that the next commission, when they take office, can deal with. I think that'd be good.
And let's Chris
start
to
with.
do this right now.
So, yeah, rush it through in the next 2 months. Yeah, we'll see how ambitious I am. Well, it's eventually going to come. I'm going over to the other body, so eventually it's going to come back to me. So okay. Campsite reviews.
Nothing new.
Any 824s?
No.
Plan of development. Anything new to talk about there?
Nothing new. No.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to leave 5.3 of the zoning regulations here. We'll see if the new Planning and Zoning Commissions want to take that up in the coming year. Anything in erosion control?
No.
454 Freeman Avenue, a request for release of a bond of $3,000 for sidewalks.
So this was regarding a two-lot subdivision on 444 Freeman Avenue. A part of their approval for subdivision, they were required to submit a $3,000 bond for sidewalks and monuments. After receiving the request from the applicant, I forwarded that over to the engineering department. They went out and inspected that same day and reported back to me that everything is satisfactory and they're okay with the release of the $3,000 bond.
We need a motion.
Make a motion by Mr. Vexi to release the bond. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Vigliotti, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. Okay, Mr. Watson, anything on the Greenway project? I know that you're now the point person.
Only that Jay is submitting a Complete Streets connectivity white paper tonight that I think actually marries itself very well with Greenway Complete Streets.
So, per the request of Commissioner Watson, I believe it was during the Community Advisory Committee meetings, we talked about potentially putting together a connectivity report that basically tries to tie together all the new recent work we've done on the Complete Streets with some of the previous work that was done regarding the greenways. So, in an effort to promote continuity between both projects, I put together this policy review. There's no action on it. I think that I would leave it to the commission to read it, and I just gave it to you tonight, and then maybe next month, if there are any changes, I'd be happy to make some changes, and then I was just going to post this informal white paper to the planning webpage as a reference as projects go forward.
Regarding Complete Streets, because these things are connected. I know I was watching the video of the last town council meeting, and I believe we had recommended the policy to the council. Some of the members had some questions there, and I believe they ended up tabling it, so they didn't take action on it. So I don't know if they're planning a special meeting to take it up. I could probably try to find out. Or if they're going to let their meeting in December is pretty much ceremonial. They're not going to do substantial stuff. So I don't know if that's going to have to be resubmitted back to them, to the new council, once they convene in December. But we'll have to keep an eye on that, because I know they had some questions regarding, especially the parking in Stratford Center. I know Councilman Chase had asked some questions about that. So, anything else on any of the plans, Greenway, Streets, Coastal Resiliency, from members?
I do have a question, and Trumbull just recently announced a $2.2 or $2.1 million grant to develop more of their Greenway. I don't know if I should be. This is a question for Jay. Did they get the money that we were trying for?
No, not as far as I know. And I spoke to the Metropolitan Planning Agency this afternoon, and we are going forward with completing our construction design plans with
Phase 1, Broad Street, wherever to
exactly
to Barnum.
Exactly, and at the last board of directors meeting for the region, our project was presented and unanimously voted upon. So that was a separate pot of money that they had been either awarded or granted through someone else.
But the next phase that we were hoping to get in line for, from Barnum to Paradise, is still an open question at this point.
It is. We've actually applied for multiple OPM grants to fund the planning process as well as the construction design for phases 2 and 3, which currently, as they stand, are Main Street from Barnum up to Paradise Green, and then Ferry Boulevard. And we're just going to have to assess them as they go forward, where there's momentum, and program any money that we receive towards those projects.
Does EPA and DOT know about Ferry Boulevard in terms of it being East Coast? Because it's my understanding that one of their suitable reuses of brownfield property is for greenways, and that they're willing to consider that as part of their capping expense. So I'm discussing something that's totally obvious to the people that are involved in all of that.
Yes, we've been working closely with the Department of Transportation over the past 2 years on this project, and they're well aware of our the 5 priority projects. And they did have specific questions about Ferry Boulevard and how that was going to interact with potential reworking of the interchange. So it's definitely on their radar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 10, we have to vote on the schedule for the 2018 Planning Commission. The schedule was submitted. Looks like everything's pretty much going to stay the same. So can we have a motion to approve? Mr. Vexi, is there a second? Mr. Sem?
Not being affected by it.
Actually, you're right. It does no effect on either you, Mr. Sempt, or myself, so we can do whatever we want. We can make it at, 3 a.m. on every Sunday. We can do that. So, okay, all in favor of the schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. And next item is discussing the Resilience Planning Assistance Project. Potential guest speaker.
So I received an email from Yukon Clear regarding a presentation from their office that would introduce new sea level rise projections that are specific to Long Island Sound and Stratford in particular, and discuss some of those ramifications as well as some legal issues that might arise incidental to any of those potential issues that we might face. It's free. It's someone who's directly working on this statewide. I thought I would offer it to the Planning Commission to see if it was something that they might be interested in hosting. Short 30-minute presentation with a quick Q&A afterwards. I thought it might be a good opportunity for everyone to kind of better understand some of the things that my office faces on a regular basis when dealing with policy with the state and some of the more recent requirements that we're going to be most likely forced to comply with. So thought it might be a good opportunity.
Certainly looks like that. Is this something you want to do with this year, or is that something for next year? Or I don't know what their availability is.
It would probably be sometime early spring.
Early spring? Okay. Maybe we can do is see if the Planning Commission hosts it and see if the other land use boards want to attend as well. Any comments on that?
My comment is that this 30-minute presentation should be the beginning and not the sum of what we... this is an area that no one knows the answers to. Mm-hmm. I don't think. So I think we're just going to be the beginning of what we're going to have to learn in order to make this something more than a lawsuit long term. Would he do something like this for the general public?
That was my question.
Well, I would think that this would actually be this would be open to the general public.
So could planning and zoning offer this as a public forum?
Absolutely.
Sponsor it and have it under our...
Because I think there's enough people, it might not be the general public, but people that are interested in issues, there is interest in town, I know from the last couple of months. I've had a lot of questions about that, about in general what's going to happen, how much of Stratford's going to be underwater and when, those kind of questions, and I think it would make some kind of sense. But
maybe what I should do is I should talk to our presenter, ask them if he thinks that it might be better off to first present to
us,
to the policy makers here in town,
right?
And then see if it's better to just invite the public to that meeting or to have a separate, more
maybe
broad
would he be willing to do both?
And that's what I'll ask.
Invite the public so they can watch us become a little more educated, and then do another one that's an open to the public for questions, where theoretically we could sit and answer some questions along with our learned person.
Sure.
I just think that would be a good way to present this to the public, because when it was done a year and a half ago, there was a very small group of people who even knew anything about it, and I still think that's the case. And
over the last 30 to 50 years, has there been an increase in sea level rising?
yeah,
6 to 9 inches,
6 to 9 inches.
depending on where you are. And depending,
How would you see that in town? What would it show up? I mean, you go down to the
Bonds Dock.
pond stop.
It's a great example, and I'm relatively new to Stratford, but I've been told, because I go down there for lunch sometimes.
there used to be a 50-foot beach there.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, but I was always told that the water never really came up into the parking lot, and now it comes almost all the way up to the access road during high tide. You'll see we have a Board of Zoning Appeals application next week where someone was putting a wall inside of the tidal wetlands in a panic because of the water was coming up so much during high tides towards their house, and this is on Orchard Street.
Well, it's also, you read the projections, and 5,000 to 6,000 people in 20 years in this town could be suffering from not high storm, not Sandy flooding, but intermittent flooding almost monthly in certain areas. That we are talking about neighborhoods that are going to have to be dammed, diked, or put on stilts or abandoned. Stratford is one of the 3 towns under the most danger, even more than towns like Milford. We have more land that is essentially below sea level than any town along the shore.
Well, we had a presentation, I remember, a very discreet presentation covering the next 100 years
Right.
onto it. And what you have to do is examine what is happening now onto things, and you have a certain amount of small time frame that you can examine and project on that and see what the story is. Because right now it is more a case of just preventive. Most of the buildings and structures down there are set up in such a way, they're raising them up and everything else, but that is not the solution.
Right.
So much for my talk today.
No?
And if anyone's,
something-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, if anybody's more interested in learning about the discussion about sea level rise, you're not seeing it so much in towns, smaller towns like Stratford, at least in the public eye, but you can look towards some of the stuff that's been going on in Miami. I mean, they have their main streets that they're not attributing it to sea level rise, and they're calling them nuisance high tides. And you're getting a foot of water at high tide on major city streets. So there's certainly material that's out there that's available to anybody. So I would recommend looking at it, and if you have any questions, you could certainly.
And did they just come in to scare you, or did they have solutions?
Who's that?
This group that's going to come in.
No, well,
We're just studying.
do they come in to scare you? I don't think it's their intent necessarily to scare you, but sometimes I think that one strategy that you see some firms do, and this is a nonprofit, this is through the University of Connecticut, they encourage that you post 2060, 2080 flood projections on your town website so people are understanding what the data that they're seeing is trending towards. And look, I mean, I don't care whether people believe it or don't, and that's everyone's own opinion. To me, it's about hedging your bet about protecting the safety of the town and the people. And if you spend some money to protect your coastline and the people that live there and nothing happens, you've lost a little bit of money. But if you do nothing and something does happen, I think that would be irresponsible, at least from my perspective. So that's my approach to it, whether you believe in it or not.
I lived in a beautiful town on the very tip of the North Fork. I was 17 inches above flood level. And we had our own community beach there that every year we lost about 6 feet of it. And in the 10 years I lived there, we lost 60 feet. We lost our community beach. It was gone. and every storm that came in of any size, the water would keep coming closer and closer and closer to inundating my house, to the point that this was in the 90s, late 98, I said, I can't sit here and watch my house be flooded. I sold and I moved. There are practical things that we have to look at, and one of the things that I like about this is he specifically talks about legal issues that are involved in this, which I think we have to understand, because it is going to be a question of legal. The town's going to have to take a legal stand of, are we going to say no to you building here, or are we going to say, no, we're not going to help you when you get flooded out, or we're only going to help you once or twice? I mean, that's the whole thing that's happening right now with flood insurance, is there used to be a law that they would rebuild as many times as you wanted it. Now they've cut it down to 2 times. Now they're saying once, we're going to, and if you don't elevate your house 14 feet, then that's it. It's your problem. So those are some of the things that we have to think about locally, I think, also.
And I think that Commissioner Senft brings up a good question about, what the presentation might be like. And to be honest, I don't know. I think that might be a good reason
to
for
do
maybe
it
that
first.
First one to be our land use boards.
Yeah.
And then you folks may say, you know what, I didn't like the presentation. I think we may want to look for someone else, and then we can go in that direction before we kind of bring everyone else in. But that's up to you all.
Okay. Any items for members' concerns or comments? Do we have anything for December?
We don't, although the next meeting is on my birthday, so
It's on your birthday.
December 19th.
Ooh,
I don't
boy.
think, currently we don't have any new items.
Okay. Well, then there's a possibility, at least, that this might be the last meeting of this commission. And if we have one in December, we'll let you know. I think we will get together for our traditional. If it's not on Jay's birthday, it'll be on a different day. You get
And
together after
we could
hours.
have a cake, even if it's not on your actual birthday.
Absolutely, we can still. That is definitely a possibility. See, you should have paid attention to the schedule a year ago, and you would know not to move that date there. So.
True sacrifices of a public servant.
Absolutely, absolutely. So well, first of all, happy Thanksgiving to all commissioners and to your families, and families that are here to help us out as well. And let me just thank every one of you in all sincerity for the privilege of presiding over this board for the last 4 years. I've come to know each one of you, and Pat and Jennifer and John and the other members that have come and gone, Joe Paul and Ann Baker, very well, and seen your dedication to our town. And everybody thinks that because it's a political thing, it's very contentious, but it's really in these boards we're all working for the betterment of our town. And it's been a pleasure getting to know all of you and to serve with you. And I know a couple of you are going to be continuing, Mr. Vigliotti, Mr. Watson, Ms. Patuski. There's going to be a new Senft on the board, so I don't know if you're going to get to keep your nameplate there. They might just give that to your brother.
I think he spells it the same.
He spells it the same way. So I'll let you brothers work that out over Thanksgiving or something like that. And obviously, Mr. Vexy, your successor will be Mr. Staley. So we look forward to hearing more things from the Planning Commission in the future. And I hope to keep in touch with all you folks. And if ever I can be of assistance to this board, I think I speak for all the members who are leaving. By all means, we are happy to do that. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Urbanski, for being our guide, too. And Mrs. DeCilio, always keeping us on track and very quick at minutes. So thank you all for all your help. Okay, so hopefully we will definitely see everybody, though, in December. We'll get together for our annual Christmas dinner, lunch, drinks, whatever you want to call it. But until then, we're still scheduled for December 19th. We'll let you know how that goes, though. It's Jay's birthday. So motion to adjourn? Mr. Senft, second Mr. Vigliotti, and Mr. Vexy. We'll make it a joint second there. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. We're out of here at 7:40.